All right. Welcome to Community Forum number 1. We're going to take a pause right now and just allow people to enter the Zoom meeting and get established. And so we're going to give it a little bit of more time before we start diving into the program. So be patient with us. Oh, I see you waving, Cameron. How are you? Thank you for joining us. Okay, so at this point, I think that we've reached 6 o'clock, and I know some people will be joining us a little bit later as the meeting goes on. But we're going to dive right into Community Forum number 1. I want to welcome you to the meeting. I also want to say happy St. Patrick's Day to those who celebrate. And one of the benefits of having a Zoom meeting, I guess, is you can be celebrating while participating in the forum, which is pretty cool. So some logistics, I'd love you to use the chat feature for questioning. So if you have a question related to anything that's been on your mind throughout the bond process, if you have a question related to anything that is said, any of the slides, go ahead and put that right into the chat. And we will pause temporarily in the presentation, and we'll definitely leave time at the end to make sure that your question is answered. If we can't answer it tonight, we'll make sure it's answered in a very short time period, and we'll get back to you. So what I will do is share my screen so that you can all participate in the forum and see what I see. Okay, so at this point, if I can get a thumbs up from Mr. Patton that my screen is being shared, thank you very much. Let's move on to, one second. Thank you. So here's our agenda for the evening. The agenda is going to give a process overview, sort of talking about how we got to this point. It's going to talk about the proposed bond program and scope that we're excited about. We're going to go through some frequently asked questions. We're going to talk about the impact to taxpayers in the community, and we're going to take as many questions and discussions as you may have for us. So we have some overarching goals that led us to this point. We know we have some aging infrastructure and some safety needs, and that came up during our facilities assessment. It's been a while since we've invested in our elementary education program. A lot of the previous bond issues have focused on different buildings and different facilities, so it's time to address those. We want to create facilities that match our long-term vision. Education has changed significantly in the past 25 years with modern furnishings, natural lighting. There's some updates that are essential for our kids in increasing student achievement and social emotional wellness. And we want to seek community input. That's been crucial throughout the process. We'll talk about the input that we've gotten thus far, and we'll talk about how that's going to look moving forward. So going back to the summer. So we knew we had facilities needs, but we wanted to have a thorough facilities assessment to actually quantify what those are. So we had a team come out from Chrisman Construction and Tower Pinkster Architecture, and they studied all of our buildings and grounds. We also met with many district stakeholders. We met with teachers. We met with administrators, all the cabinet team here at Allegan Public Schools. We had 3 community forums, and we had 3 community surveys in which we were trying to prioritize and finalize what our proposal would be. And we've reached a plan, and that plan, I'm proud to say, was built by the community. Previous bond projects, I think rightly so, were proposed with things in mind, like the Performing Arts Center and the pool. This one we built together. We took the input from the community survey, we developed scenarios, and we came to a conclusion based upon that feedback, which was wonderful. So this number is extremely exciting, $87.5 million investment with no increase to the current millage rate, none. We levy 7.55 mils on our debt, and that number would not change. We'll get into more explanation of that a little bit later so that you understand what that means and what that impact is on the community. The reason that's possible it really is a credit to someone who's in this digital room, which is Amy Chrisman, our financial person for the district, and previous administrators as well, putting us in a position where we can come to the community with this proposal and not have it increase taxes one bit. So let's go through the scope. I'm going to start with some of the smaller components and work up to some of the larger components. So our facilities needs at the Early Childhood Center. We have them. We have some air conditioning needs, some HVAC, some security enhancements, some parking lots, mechanical systems, roofing. We have some needs at the administration building, roofing, some flooring and some mechanical systems. Our transportation building needs some work. And we really need a new district communication system, and we need it for two reasons. One of them is because it's the law, and the other one is because it's a huge safety mitigation measure for us at Allegan Public Schools. A new communication system would be what they call E911 compatible, which would allow law enforcement to respond to anything at the school down to the building level and then down to the room level, which would be a safety enhancement for us. So that's one of the additional components that would be a part of this bond that would be safety related. At the high school, anyone that's been in the high school knows that the facility's been well maintained, but that the classrooms are dated. So we need to update that to modern furnishings. Teachers would explain it as traditional desks that are a bit clunky and difficult to move around in a cooperative setting. We need kids doing projects. We need kids to be able to go in a group of 4 and then back to a group of 1, back to a group of 2, seamlessly within the classroom, also while being able to utilize their technology and observe what the teacher's doing. And our current furnishing situation does not allow for that. So we need a classroom refresh, a common space refresh at the high school. We have needs in the auditorium. It is truly the crown jewel of our district. It is, I believe, the finest auditorium in the state, but we have sound and lighting issues that are 20 years old at this point, and they need updating. Our athletic track needs updating. Some surface upgrades are necessary at this time. The security cameras at the high school are dated and old and aren't as easy to navigate for safety. And we'll show you some exciting images today about what a secured entry might look like at Allegan High School, and we'll get to that in a minute. We have some infrastructure needs as well. Those are not always as exciting, but they're expensive and important. Water heaters, boilers, roofs, pavement, mechanical systems. They are essential to the health of our kids, the comfort level of our kids, and all of that leads to increased learning and student achievement. So I want to show you this exciting image. This image is a rendering of what a secured vestibule might look like. And what I mean by that is when someone enters one of our buildings, how do we want them to feel? We want them to feel welcome, but we also want to present a feeling of safety. So right now, if someone is buzzed into the high school, they have the ability to enter the building and maybe not stop at the office. This secured vestibule would force visitors through the office in what I think is a very welcoming and attractive manner, be able to be greeted by our staff, identify their purpose and help their student or visit whatever it is that they need to do. So this is, I think, exciting to know that we can have a welcoming environment while staying safe at the same time. And I know when I first saw this image, I was pretty astounded at what a great look that would be as we enter Allegan High School. Similarly, at the middle school as well, could have a secured vestibule that would force people through the office instead of letting them in the building. So let's move to the middle school. Again, some dated classrooms and furnishings. Teachers don't have that flexible furnishing to be able to move in and out of groups. Those of you that have seen science classrooms at the middle school, I will say this is one of the more exciting things for me in this proposal is right now science at the middle school is taught in rooms that are just traditional classrooms. You would not enter that room and think it's a science room. It doesn't have demonstration space or lab space, doesn't have a lot of sinks, doesn't have the ability to do true science with glassware and storing of chemicals. The middle school just doesn't have the capacity to do that right now. So this bond proposal would add a science wing that would be compatible with modern day STEM ability, and it would be just wonderful. Again, updated secure entry, security cameras. And one I know you'll want to talk about, which is pickup and drop off at the middle school is going to be greatly improved. And I'll show you an image of what that might look like. New tennis courts. We have a long standing tradition in tennis of success. And to be honest, it's a community resource. We have many community members that utilize our tennis courts and stay fit. It's a health resource for our community, and they need to be replaced. They have served their time well, but they are due. So take a look at this. So this is just an idea of what one of these additional science classrooms might look like at L.A. White Middle School. You can see the furnishings are flexible. You could move in and out of groups. The chairs can as well. There's stations that you can work on with a team. There's sinks. There's demonstration stations for teachers. Even the pipes could demonstrate science in terms of hot and cold water by their color coding. And you can see that the demonstration station for the teacher would be equipped to do experiments in front of the students and have robust conversations about science and its impact on our world. I was a science teacher for 6 years at Allegan High School when I first started, and science is near and dear to my heart, but it's also near and dear to many people's future employment. And so we need to do a better job of preparing our kids for the technological and science world that we live in. But I think when I saw that image, it was exciting, that possibility for our kids. Pick up and drop off at the middle school, as we've described, is an enormous challenge right now. The middle school staff works so hard to make sure that people are using the lanes correctly, dropping the students off on the proper passenger side, which I guess right now opens up into traffic. So we've asked that they get out on the driver's side in the back seat, and not all of them do that. We just need to design it differently. We need to design it with safety in mind and design it in a way where all roads do not need to lead to 115th Avenue. And that's where the bottlenecks occur. So we need to incorporate Goodrich Street. We need to allow traffic to flow into the middle school safely and then out both 115th and Goodrich, relieving some of that pressure. We need to allow our buses to come in independently, and they can come in on the west side and they can loop around safely. And then it's exciting to think about, they could maybe even loop down into an internal bus loop that would go to our new proposed elementary learning community. There could be a pedestrian path that leads to that community. And you can imagine that would be exciting for the neighborhood to have those buses move within our property versus outside into the neighborhoods once they arrive. You can see the science wing would be tucked in the back, and happily for me, that science wing would overlook a piece of that forest that still is behind the building, which could add some nature-based components to instruction, which is exciting. You can see the tennis courts would be new. We'd have room for staff and visitor parking. And this is just one idea. The end result may not look like this, but this is to give you an idea that it is possible to improve that and to make that more safe. And now to the biggest component of the bond proposal, which is a new grade center elementary learning community. This would serve K-5 students. It would have new technology, flexible furnishings. It would be secure and safe. It would be modern. It would be designed for the future. It would have operational savings that I will get into in a minute. Very convenient logistics for drop-off and pickup, which I know right now are a big challenge, and decreased transportation costs, and then future potential for our existing sites. And I'll talk about that a little bit later as well. So this is a rendering of just a sketch of what it might look like. You can see that it's really two buildings that are linked for operational reasons. And what I mean by that is linked by common HVAC systems, linked by a common kitchen. And there's a reason for that. We want to utilize taxpayer dollars the best that we can, the most efficiently that we can. And taking two buildings and linking them with these efficiencies while allowing it to feel like its own independent upper and lower L is an exciting opportunity for us. You can see the bus loop would be separate from parent drop-off. You can see the playgrounds would be separate. And we'll get into this a little more detail as we move on here this evening. What might one of those wings look like? 7 classrooms per grade level, allowing for all of the students to be served. Something that would be exciting is something called a grade level learning commons. I'll show you a rendering of that as well. It's a very exciting opportunity. Potentially some outdoor classrooms, which are very popular right now to get kids in nature and maybe away from the screens from time to time. And you can see that they would have an area where they could have their locker and materials, all within the wing, all surrounded by kids within their own grade level. And that would be a very exciting opportunity. So think about this learning commons idea and think about each wing having one of these. So let's say some kids need enrichment. Let's say that they are advancing in their work and somebody wants to take them into these learning commons and do an enrichment lesson or a remediation or intervention lesson. Let's say that there's some small group rooms in the back linked to this where kids could get individual or small group help and assistance. This would be a very welcoming natural light. This would be a piece of each wing that I think would be utilized extensively throughout every day. And we simply have nothing like this in our current schools. So let's talk about this property for a minute. People have asked, where would this go? There's a property behind the middle school, 90 acres of property, and it's adjacent to us. And what I mean by that is adjacent to the middle school property that we already own. And as a school district, anytime that it's possible to acquire property adjacent to you for the future, it is a very good idea to look at doing that. But in this situation, we've entered into an agreement with the property owner that this property would be purchased with the bond only if it passes. So we're obviously hoping that there's support and that property would then be purchased and we would have a site that would be connected to the middle school with this internal bus loop, a pathway for kids to be able to move and really use a campus approach to our education at Allegan Public Schools, which would be exciting. So we started thinking about, where on that site the school might go. And this is just an idea of how that might look with the separate pickup and drop off and separate playgrounds. This property has actually 4 ways out of it. This property can be exited at Sherman, at Sunset, out to 34th, and also not shown here, out to the Goodrich Academy area on the way toward the middle school. So you think about the volume of vehicles that may be going to this site, I would equate it to the amount of vehicles that currently go to Allegan High School or did when we had more students, approaching that number of 852 students were at the high school at one point. And they have only this many ways out of that property, and pickup and drop off and traffic go very well at that facility. And so I'm very confident that the pickup and drop off situation would be greatly improved from where it is today at some of our landlocked sites that we currently operate. I want to dig in a little bit to this idea of consolidation. I think it's a very important thing to discuss today. So when I say why consolidate, why do a grade center model where all the teachers in first grade are together, in second grade are together? What does that do? And what does it do to consolidate our services? So point 1 is student services. And what I mean by that are things like social work. Social workers right now have to travel between buildings. They would not have to do that in this model. Our speech therapists have to travel. They would not have to do this in this model. Our specialist teachers, art, music, PE, computers, technology, they have to travel. Do we want them traveling or do we want them servicing our kids? And so I think it's important to think about the benefits to our students by consolidating into an upper and lower elementary situation. It would be a huge benefit, in my opinion, to our kids and our staff. Think about class size. We'll get into that a little bit in a little bit. I think 1 or 2 slides down. Class sizes could be perfectly balanced, perfectly averaged. And I'll give a little more detail about that because I think that's a really important piece to why this is a good idea for our students. Parent and family and community engagement. We have very powerful PTOs that work extremely hard to provide services for our kids and resources for our teachers. Imagine if they joined forces. Imagine how powerful that could be to our kids if all of these individuals servicing their individual schools could come together for the benefit of all of our little tigers. It would be exciting, and it would be a family engagement the likes of which we don't have right now. Think about Kids Hope mentoring program. Imagine them now being able to come to one location and provide all of that mentorship for our kids. Again, just an exciting opportunity. Operational efficiencies. We're talking things like utilities, mowing, snow plowing. A tremendous amount of operational dollars go in that direction right now. We would be able to allocate those dollars to better serve our kids instead of spending them where they are currently, which would be a fiscally responsible decision for us. Educational equity. What I think about that is I'm picturing a student at, let's say Westward that is having some struggles, and they go through an evaluation process and they're determined to need more support than a program at Westward could offer. Right now, they'd actually have to leave that school and go to Dawson because that's where our level 2 programs are located. That's, that can be very traumatic for a student. And in this model, we would never have to pull a student that requires that level of service from one school to another because they would exist in their school. They could be with their friends. They could be with their peers. That educational equity piece to me is very important. Teacher collaboration. Right now, sometimes there's 2 teachers in a grade level in a building and they talk all the time. Sometimes there's just one and they don't have a partner to talk to. Imagine if there were 7 or 6 and they could all collaborate on the best way to teach 3rd grade math or 3rd grade reading and on and on. Very powerful collaboration opportunity. Right now, our food service, our food's cooked at the high school. It is put in a van. It is shipped to the elementaries and kept under a warmer. We can do better than that. This would allow us to have improved food quality, improved nutrition, and that leads to student achievement. And that's something we know is true. Extracurricular activities. Think about that for a minute. Some schools ran a program called Tigers in Motion in the past, and some didn't. Some offered certain clubs and some didn't. And that to me did not feel equitable and fair. A kid should not have to have the ability to go to one particular elementary school in order to be engaged in one particular program. I would like all students to have the same opportunities because we are all Tigers. Perceived competition. This would eliminate any perceived competition between the buildings. I think would be creating a positive community culture. So let me dig into class size for a minute. We have a situation right now at Dawson where there are 2 4th grades. One of them has 20 students, one of them has 17. You take that exact same grade level at Pine Trails, and they have 29 and 29. And then one at West has 26. So what should the average be? The average should be 24, which would be very reasonable. But we can't achieve that average because of the distribution of our students geographically within the district. So when you have a grade center model, you're able to do so. And that is a benefit to teachers and kids. So now for a hypothetical situation. This doesn't exist right now, but it has in the past. So imagine this. A lot of our classes, cohorts I'll call them, let's say the 3rd grade, has around 150 students. So then we ask ourselves administratively, how many teachers should that equal? The answer is 6. So that's what we should do. But let's say, hypothetically, that 150 is distributed in the manner I have on the screen. 62 at Pine. Well, I'm not going to do 2 sections of 31. That's too many. So we have to do 3. And so we have to split that up into 3 sections. Let's say there's 54 at Dawson. Well, now we're doing 2 at 27. And let's say there's 34 at West. That number still equals 150, but now West needs 2 teachers at 17 students each because the number just didn't divide well. So in my example, that requires 7 teachers. We only needed 6, but now we have to have 7. So what have we done about that in the past? We've always utilized retirements, resignations to balance. We've never used layoffs for teachers in this scenario. But moving forward in a grade center model, every teacher in that example would add general fund dollars and opportunities for our kids. We would have very reasonable class sizes, and we would have the ability to utilize our financial status significantly improved way for operations, for curriculum, for activities, and on and on. So let me back up and let's take a pause. I'm going to check with Mr. Patton, and I want to see if there's anything in the chat, any questions thus far that have come in that we want to just take a pause and address before we move on to addressing some of the frequently asked questions.
It doesn't appear we have any questions in either chats right now, but this is an opportunity. If people would just like to speak, they are more than welcome to.
That's okay. We can proceed, and I welcome the purpose of this is twofold. We want to get accurate, truthful information out into the community, but we also want to hear what's on people's minds, what questions they may have, because we really want to dispel any myths that might be out there, and tonight might be a good opportunity to do that. So we can move on, and maybe some concerns will come up.
Mr. Antoine, it looks like Holly might have a question.
Sure. Holly, go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me?
I can now, Holly. Sorry, I couldn't before.
Oh, all right. I have more than just a question. I mean, I've done my research on this, and I've seen schools consolidate, and it doesn't go well. If I could just read a statement real quick.
Sure.
Okay. While we're talking about making a larger elementary school in Allegan, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has spent over the last decade $28 billion to make them smaller in New York, Chicago, Texas, Oregon, Ohio, various locations around the country. The Gates Foundation is not simply spending money to decrease the student to teacher ratio. They are spending money to build smaller schools enrolling less than 600 students. We already have what they want. Why are they doing that? Because the statistics are there. Students from smaller schools enrolling less than 400 have higher testing in fourth grade reading comprehension. Students coming from smaller elementary schools have higher than average eighth grade testing than peers from larger elementary schools. Overall, smaller schools have higher graduation rates and higher college retention rates, especially in impoverished areas versus larger schools in impoverished areas. Why are the test scores higher? Because smaller schools have stronger social connection. Teachers know their students, what they can achieve, have a stronger relationship with that student to help them when they are struggling, and students know all their peers and are once again statistically have less behavioral issues with fellow peers and more incentives to succeed. Parents are also more involved. Because of this, small schools are found to be safer and more secure. The U.S. Department of Education, after conducting multiple studies of school shootings and violence, actually identifies large school size as one of the 5 characteristics that increases the likelihood of serious violent incidents occurring. What are some advantages of larger schools? Larger schools offer a variety of services and extracurricular activities. We already combined the schools to do this for sports, 4th and 5th grade basketball, tennis, etc. with the athletic department. We also combine schools for robotics club in elementary school. Larger schools also have more AP courses and opportunities for college and admissions. Well, this doesn't apply because our middle school and high school is already combined. Long-term, the Gates Foundation found that the cost of savings for large versus small didn't pay out. In New York City, they found small schools spent 23% more per student than schools with more 2,000 students. But because of small schools had higher graduation rate The cost per graduate was less overall, $49,553 per student compared to $49,578 per high school student. The cost advantage made up in the end. Your biggest financial concern is with buses. Doing the math with the route between schools for drop-off is 5 miles, and there are 25 buses active in the bus garage. A bus gets 5 miles to the gallon. You want to save $75 a day with diesel. Around $3, amounts to $13,500 a year. Bus routes change all of the time. Have some kids moving around in town and new residents come in. It is very easy for each of those buses to extend their route by 5 miles or more. All of that savings is now dust to the wind. Where can you save money? The University of Texas found they saved $100,000 a year just by going to paperless forms and paperless financial payment systems for staff and students. Throw some solar panels, run all the school lights on them. The tech kids would love it. As far as, I've lived this. In West Virginia, they don't just consolidate neighborhoods into one town school. They consolidate towns into one county school to save money. You're talking about getting on the bus at 5 a.m. to meet school at 7:30 a.m. in the morning. I quickly watched growing up one of the top schools in the state go to the worst within a matter of 3 to 4 years when that happened. And I have no problems with the middle school and high school infrastructure and changes. That is great. But the consolidating the elementary school, I do not think that this is a good idea at all. And I don't see the cost savings out of doing it. And that's all.
Thank you, Holly. I do appreciate you being here and positively, productively expressing yourself. This is the venue for that. And not everybody always expresses themselves the right way, and this is the right way. So the first thing I want to say is thank you, because of not everybody has taken this approach.
You're welcome. So, my goal is to do it with numbers and research. So
I appreciate that. Yep. And I do want to address a couple of the things that you had mentioned, and one of them was safety. So I had to ask myself this question, and the question is, would we be more safe or less safe in the model that is being proposed? And I know that we would be more safe because of design elements that would be incorporated into the new building, because of treatments that would be on windows for sight lines, because of secure vestibules, because of security cameras, because of maybe not related to the bond, but our strong relationship with law enforcement, who would be right down the road. They respond very well to us whenever we need them. So from a safety standpoint, this is the more safe approach, is to do what we're proposing. And I respect what you said, but we considered and are considering safety as one of the primary reasons to do this. So that I just wanted to kind of give a different perspective on that for a moment. When it comes to size, I believe that we may be considered small, even in this model. So projected would be approximately 450 students in each school. So the upper 450 and the lower 450, if you're looking at our current elementary numbers that are in our system as we speak. So 450 is a number that has existed at Dawson in the past and has existed at Pine Trails in the past. So we have already run buildings of this size, which I think most people would still consider small. Would they be larger than they are now? I think so, because we have had population loss of students. But historically, to have 450 students in one of our existing elementaries is not unusual. So I respect what you said about sometimes you can get too big. And I just don't think this is what's happening in our scenario. But I appreciate you sharing that perspective. Some of the things you mentioned about combined programs is actually what excites me the most. Things like robotics and clubs and extracurriculars and the ability for kids to stay after school and do things, potentially walk over to the soccer field or field house. some of the programming elements that we could provide to our kids is part of the excitement. I know you mentioned that, and I just wanted to address that as well. We do try to be as paperless as we can, so I want to touch on that for a minute. We do a pretty good job with that, although we did have to make quite a bit of learning packets during remote learning time, and that was a little bit different than we were hoping for. Solar panels, I think, are a super exciting idea, and I would be excited to explore that as how we could use renewable resources in this new facility if it were to pass. So I'd be excited about the solar panel idea, as you stated. I think that would be wonderful. And, we're not a county school. So even with this move, we wouldn't be doing what is in other states. And I'm aware of what you're speaking about, where they really do that, where they bus kids at 5 in the morning and all the kids in the county go to the same place. And that's not happening here. We're still Allegan, we're still Tigers, and we're not going to be incorporating the county. So again, I appreciate it. It's just a different perspective, and we need that actually. We need to hear all perspectives in order to make the best plan that the voters can then decide upon, what they would like to do. You also kind of walked me into my next slide, which is the whole question of why not renovate? Why not do that? And so I think you segued quite nicely into what we'd like to talk about next. And so we did put some extensive time into a renovation scenario. And, we came up with quite a few, complications, I guess, of that. And I'll get into that a little bit more as we move forward here. We talked about having, Pine Trails be the lower L and Westward be the upper L. And, we're left with things that would be somewhat improved, but the sites did not allow for us to reach the level of pickup and drop off and the additions to that building and the renovations that would be required from a construction standpoint would require us to have what we call swing space. And what swing space means is, where are the kids going to go to school while the renovations are occurring? It also would create a situation where if you were a parent and you had a lower L and an upper L student, you'd have to, head over to Pine and pick up your first grader and then hustle over to, Westward and pick up your fourth grader, and then maybe go to the middle school as well. So having the buildings on one location is a significant convenience for parents when it comes to pick up and drop off with multiple children and multiple grade levels. And if you can see on the right, there was a cost factor. And so you think about the cost of renovating, where you'd be left with still a base structure that, if you're thinking about Westward, is 68 years old. We were wondering, should we spend 84 to 85 million on a bond proposal to do a renovation with the issues I just outlined, when we could have a new modern facility? And it became clear to not just me, but the families that participated in the forum and the families that filled out the survey. This was the choice. This was the number one choice of the scenarios that we outlined. And so we followed the community's lead and went with this one as the one to put before the voters. And so this leads to the question of, why one building? We think it's the best use of taxpayer dollars with some of the shared spaces we discussed. We know it will still feel like two buildings and still be very personal. They'll have their own playgrounds. They'll have their own leadership, their own secretaries. Their own pickup and drop off. So it'll feel like its own school. It's connected for efficiency's sake. We would have two gym spaces that could then be opened up into one large space, which is another resource potentially for the communities. We have our gym space utilized by community members all the time. We would be able to have presentations in that space, which would be wonderful. We have a situation now with our fifth graders that sometimes go down and help the kindergartners. We didn't want to lose that. Right now, that could still happen. Our fifth graders could still help our young students and mentor them and be a good role model for them about how to navigate school. That's something that we would keep. So we would still have that community feel, and families wouldn't have to go all over the district to pick up and drop off their children. And this was the clear choice of the community when we did our forums. So then the question became, what would happen to the existing buildings? Well, we've already demonstrated, I think, a successful goal of what do we do when we had our reconfiguration. What would we do with the building? And what we did is we created an amazing community resource that never existed before. It's serving right now approximately 120 students just in the Little Tigers Daycare Learning Center portion. Those kids are in a learning curriculum-based daycare. And I ask myself, where would they be? May they probably be with family, which would be wonderful, but a curriculum-based learning center, preparing them for preschool, giving them preschool, and then preparing them for K-12 education is going to have long-term impacts. That didn't exist in our community before. We had a tremendous daycare shortage, and now we've helped as a partner with the community bridge that gap. And so we've already successfully converted one of our buildings into an amazing resource. There is money in the bond budget to return our buildings to green space. That would be attractive to developers. We have a mid-level housing crisis in Allegan as well. Not enough places for people to live. And if a developer would have interest in that, we would be interested in talking to them as well. We will not leave blighted buildings. It's never been in the plan. It's not in the plan. But we will entertain community conversations about what they could become. Some people have mentioned senior living. Some people have mentioned some other pretty exciting ideas that would be beneficial for the whole community. And if we're able to do this and utilize our current sites and sell them to a use that would be beneficial to the community, would be beyond exciting. And I think it would benefit people, even those that may not have kids in school, which would be, I think, a wonderful thing. So I'm going to temporarily turn this over to Amy Chrisman. She's our Director of Finance and Operations. She's going to talk a little bit about the tax impact of the bond proposal. So I'm going to turn it over.
Is everyone still on?
Yep, I don't know what happened.
I think we lost Mr. Antoine. Hopefully he'll be back soon.
Yeah, on my screen, it looked like Amy and James both froze. So I'm guessing they're both at the administration building.
Yep, just got a text from Mr. Antoine, so just a second. Nope, here we go. Mr. Antoine's coming back in. Thanks for your patience, everyone.
You're welcome.
Okay, it looks like I'm back. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
What happened? It looks like those of us that were here at the administration building got lost for a while. Did we keep all of our participants?
We did.
Awesome. Well, that's exciting. I was worried for a second. I saw Cameron there. Hope you're doing well, Cam.
I am.
Great. Good to see you. So I'm
Good to see
going
you too.
to then reshare my screen. Sounds like the right approach, correct? All right. Can Mr. Patton give me a thumbs up that my screen is visible? Whew. Thanks for hanging in there, everybody. Made me a little nervous. So is Amy back?
I am.
Okay, Amy
we get
Chrisman.
to the most exciting part of the presentation, and
That's
I thought you
right.
shut me down.
Yeah, well, now that the suspense has built up, we're going to turn the financial piece over to you.
Yeah, luckily I had my other screens on and I saw my internet connection go down. I was like, oh, phew, it's not me. So anyway, this slide represents the mills, where we're currently at, where we're going over the next 20 years with both existing, and if we were successful with passing the extension of the existing 7.55 mills. So the yellow line, the reason that yellow line begins to go down is because the amount of principal and interest payments on our existing debt is starting to go down. By law, we cannot levy any more funds than needed to meet existing bonded debt payments. So that's why that you see that millage begin to drop. If we were successful in passing this extension renewal, with a 7.55 mils, you see that it will generate that 87.55 million. Across the bottom, you'll see the number of years. It would extend the debt of the district about 7 years from where we currently are. You'll also see in the upper right-hand corner, this bond would be a 3 series issue. So we've structured the needs of the district in 3 different phases. Obviously, we wouldn't need $87.5 million right up front. So we will issue those bonds in like 2-year series. So that's what the 3 series means. It also allows us to generate additional revenue that way. So there aren't any.
One thing I'll add is this number 7.55 has served Allegan Public Schools very well. This was the number back when the high school was renovated in, I think, 96. Is that right, Amy?
There's a couple of them, maybe like 92, 96. Yep.
This was 98. The number. This was the number with the pool and the auditorium. This was the number with the field house and conference center and technology. So the 7.55 number, Allegan's been very consistent with the ability for us to ask for that to be continued versus asking the public for an increase. And it served us very well. We've been able to accomplish with the support of the community some amazing things without raising their tax rate. Should we be ready to go to the next slide, Mrs. Chrisman?
Yep. So this is kind of just a snapshot that shows some of our surrounding districts in our county, where they're at as opposed to where we are at in the number of debt mills that we levy. As you can see, we're kind of in the middle, I guess, compared to our surrounding districts. So I think this is just good information.
It is. So this tells me, that we're not out of line with what would be an appropriate debt millage for a community of our size. I also, want to just indicate that the district's been very responsible with the debt over the period of the past, 20, 25 years. We've engaged in a process called refunding, which is, refinancing our debt from time to time, and has saved millions of dollars for the taxpayer based upon those decisions from the past. We have had some neighbors that have recently passed some bond issues. And one of the things I heard, it's just a myth that I would like to dispel, is that this proposal would raise taxes. And what I heard was because something similar happened with our neighbors in Plainwell, and that their taxes went up. So allow me to clarify. So Plainwell Public Schools passed a millage last year, going from 7.28 to 10.55 mils. So they asked for a 3.27 mil increase. We are asking for no increase, none. So yes, their taxes did go up, but I just want to make that understood to those in the forum that, if you do your debt in a way that is just sort of keeping the rate consistent for your community, we don't have to come and ask for an improvement when needs like this are revealed and educational models of this nature are desired by the community. So I wanted to just make that point. And I also want to think about the community as a whole. A good friend once told me what's good for schools is good for the community, and what's good for the community is good for schools. In a community our size, that is as true as anywhere. We are an integral part of the economy of this community, and the economy of this community is an integral part of our building. We need and want to provide the very best so that people that work here have the very best schools to attend, the best facilities that we can offer. That will not only attract, but it will retain our current families in our district. It'll support industry because it's just it'll be an attractive school. And the improvements to our other schools will be such that our facilities will be second to none in the county. And I would even go more broadly with many of our facilities. Positively impact home values. Good schools are essential for home values. And so those of you that might be wondering, if I don't have children, how is this going to impact me? I think that's a way that we know that it would. And just community pride. I mean, we're a hub of the community. When we're, hopefully very soon able to go back to, parades and events. We are an entertainment hub of the community with games and drama and band concerts and choir. And we want to be a partner with the city and our surrounding townships in this proposal. So strong communities, strong schools. So before we get to some questions, I just want to make sure everyone's aware. It is May 4th, and we'll use the tagline, May the 4th be with us as we approach that date, because we are excited. Absentee voters can still access that if that is their choice at those websites. This recording will be available on our website, on the bond website as well. And you can watch it, share it, make sure people have accurate information, and by all means, send them to me. I would love to speak to anybody, especially if they might not quite be clear on some of the things that we're proposing. So I want to turn it over to questions, whether that be in the chat, whether that be verbalized. This is the time we've reached the end of the presentation portion, but I would love to take some questions if anyone in the forum has them.
A couple questions pop up in the chat, Mr. Antoine. The first was from Carrie, who was inquiring about elementary teachers' support of consolidating schools, and also wondering if each wing would have its own principal.
That's a great question. I'll take the second one first. So each wing might mean each grade level. And so that would be approximately 150 students, and they would not have their own principal, but each upper L and lower L would have their own principal. And actually we'll need all of our current principals. They might have a little bit of a different roles and job sharing within that, but they will have, each side of the building would have its own leadership, and we would maintain that at that ratio that we have right now, because we know we have the amount of kids that need that support. The question, what was the first one again, Mr. Patton?
The first question was, let me scroll back up here. The elementary teachers buy-in to a consolidated school.
Yeah, the grade center model has been something, the majority, I don't want to speak for all of them, the majority of our elementary teachers have desired a grade center model for well over a decade, actually. They sometimes feel disconnected to their peers that teach the same grade level, and they don't get to see them very often until we get them together for a random professional development day, which might be a few times a year. They want to be with their peers, they want to collaborate, they want that opportunity. We definitely have music and art teachers that want their own room. They currently don't have their own room. This would allow for that, which would be just a huge benefit for them and the students. And so I would say right now, I just don't want to go as far to say that I can say every single elementary teacher, but the vast majority have expressed support for this proposal.
There was a question from YouTube. Diane was wondering about the initial, at least this is what I believe she was asking about, the initial surveys that went out. I think she was wondering about how those surveys went out, who those surveys went to, that we ultimately arrived at the community idea of a consolidated school.
Yeah, those community forums they were virtual. And we had those on Zoom and YouTube as well. And the surveys went out to all of the members of our school community. This would be staff and families. And our desire to access beyond that was hopeful for social media. So we blasted them out on social media, hoping that we would get some participation from that. We also had a Zoom meeting just for the people that would be surrounding the property we're looking to purchase. So they got a postcard and invited to their own Zoom meeting just to make sure that they sort of were heard, and we, want to be good neighbors if this were to come to fruition.
Heather had a question in the chat, but I believe someone provided her with a link to the page on the bond website that will hopefully clarify our question since it was discussed earlier. And let's see if we have anything new here. And it looks like Betsy also had a question about whether we are looking at renovating the current elementary schools, and maybe if you could clarify again why that isn't on the table as far as just renovating the existing elementaries.
Sure. Yep, we did go over that, but it's worth going over again. The financial difference was very, very small between very heavy renovations to our buildings and building a new facility. Heavy renovations would have some drawbacks. One being the building would still be old. It would have some new parts, but it would still have some old infrastructure. The other would be that the site, our building sites would still be locked in terms of pickup and drop off, which would be quite the challenge. If we converted them into grade centers, which would be the desire, family, if they had multiple students in multiple grade levels, would have to travel quite a bit more, maybe to pick up a student at Pine and then pick up a student at West and then maybe the middle school or high school. And so having them renovated and then having a grade center model with the buildings being in separate locations across town would be quite inconvenient for our families. And we obviously are trying to make things easier for our families and more efficient for them. So those are some of the reasons we discussed. One of the primary ones being that financially, there wasn't much difference. And I guess one more thing we talked briefly was something called swing space, which means that if we're going to heavily renovate Pine Trails, where are those kids going to go to school while that happens? And we don't have swing space right now available to help meet that need. So those are some of the reasons of the why not renovate conversation that we had earlier.
It looks like that's it for questions in the chat, but this is a fantastic opportunity. If you have any other questions, to go ahead and share them now, please.
Anything on the YouTube chat or anything coming through any other avenues?
Let's see. Heather had a question about, and I think you kind of addressed this also, about curricular materials, because she didn't see new textbooks on the list of things that would possibly be purchased.
Yep, that's a good question. Bond dollars have restrictions on what can be purchased, and curricular tools like textbooks are not on that list. So this is more about facility needs. But I will say that the efficiencies that we could gather with this proposal, such as utility savings, plowing, mowing, and on, would absolutely translate into very significant financial savings for the district that could then be converted into curricular materials for kids when needed. So there is an enormous curricular impact bond dollars would not go directly to them, but there is no question the savings here are real and they would impact our kids in a very powerful way.
Betsy had a question about if this would still include renovations to the Early Childhood Center.
It would. Yep, we do have some needs there that need to be addressed. Air conditioning, some things in the kitchen, I think maybe some roofing, some of the parking lot concerns. So we would still do some renovations there to just keep that up to speed. Some of the modern furnishings in the portion of the building that's operated under Allegan Public Schools. So there would still be some things happening there that would make sure that building's in good shape.
And another member in the chat looks like just asked a question that was addressed earlier about what will happen with the current elementary buildings, what we're looking at. And I don't know if you could just maybe clarify that one more time.
Sure. Nope, I don't mind going over that again. The biggest point I want to make is that we will not be leaving old, blighted buildings that are both an eyesore and or dangerous. So that's not an option. We do have money in the bond budget that could return them to green space that would be attractive for a developer, and maybe some mid-level housing could take its place that would be a huge benefit to the community. But primary, we would be listening to the community about, what else they could be used for. I know there are other communities in which a school building was converted into senior housing. It was purchased and converted into that benefit for the community. So we would be entertaining those types of ideas about what does Allegan need? Do we have the ability to help work with an agency to have them purchase our buildings to provide that? And so we would definitely have, I think, a good plan one way or another with our existing facilities, our existing buildings.
Mr. Hodge had a question about student count the last 5 years and the projected student count for the next 5. Do we have any information about that?
I don't have that at my fingertips, but I can address that to some extent. So before you make a bond proposal, you must go through an organization that statistically gathers your projected enrollment data. I think it might even be longer than 5 years. And so what that does is it outlines essentially, what you should build, how large of a facility you need to build within your reasonable projection of your student population. So we've done that work, and we know that then the process to apply for the ability to do this bond included that report. And so our enrollment is projected to continue to drop a little. And I know Mrs. Crispin right now, it looks like she might be digging that out. It's called Middle Cities. It's an organization that does this work. And I think the turnaround in kindergarten for increased enrollment, if I recall, and please, Mrs. Crispin, if you can find it, was with maybe in 5 or 6 years, we might start seeing an uptick in projected kindergarten enrollment. And you are muted if you found it. I don't know if you found it
Yep,
yet.
I did find it. There's so Middle Cities is an outside company that we have to. We can't just do this projection ourselves. They're experienced at this, so they provide a document that has different methods. So those methods might include, like, do you have major things happening in a community, like factories closing or offices coming in or new structures. So it's a fairly large document. So I don't want to misquote or misrepresent anything, but our enrollment does at the end of this 5-year projection, which was 25-26, does look like it will kind of plateau. This is a several page document, and we'd be more than willing to share with anyone that wants it. I have it in digital format. I can email it to you. If you want to put your email in the chat, we can make sure you get a copy of it.
And that leads to a couple other questions. So one of them being, are we building the wings big enough? Would they be large enough? So right now, if we have an average around 150 students, 7 classrooms at 25 each could handle 175 students easily, and somewhat more than that. And if you imagine that happening maybe at every single grade level, we would have to have an influx of 100 to 150 students in elementary to, maybe have a wing be, at capacity. So the projection doesn't bear that out. We know right now we would be projecting building the building correctly at the size needed to support our kids now and into the projected future.
It looks like that's it for questions. So I don't know, Mr. Antoine, if you would like to
Yeah, that's
introduce
okay.
our special surprise.
Yeah, we have a video that is gonna, it's exciting, and it kind of tells the story of why we've come to you and what we're asking for. And that video is going to be entered into the chat, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Patton. And as we sort of sign off, you can click on that and give it a watch. I think it'll help tell the story of why we would come to you with this proposal. And I guess the way I'd like to think about that also is, now that I've explained, what our ideas are and what the proposal is, and our ability to meet the needs of our kids without raising your tax bill, some might say it would have been irresponsible to not come to you with this proposal. It is something that's exciting and would impact kids for the next 50 plus years in our community. And to say that we all did this together would be just about the most amazing thing we could do for our students and our community. So as that gets entered into the chat, are we going to sign off at that point, Mr. Patton? Or we're not watching that live?
Nope, just going to post it up there. I think it will be a better experience if people just watch it on their own browsers.
Absolutely. So doesn't seem like there's any more questions, but again, please direct people to me. I would love to speak with anybody in the community. I would welcome an invite to speak in any group in the community, in person or virtually. I want to make myself available to anyone that might want to know more. So thank you all so much for taking time on a very nice St. Patrick's Day evening. And I'm going to sign off now so you all can go enjoy your families. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful night.